Dublin, 1985. A city of stone and secrets, where power wasn't measured in votes or pounds, but in whispers, loyalties, and sometimes blood. The Murphy family had ruled the North Side for 3 generations, their names spoken with equal parts fear and respect in pubs from Fairview to Finglas. But even empires built on violence have their vulnerabilities, and Jack Murphy's dynasty faced its greatest threat, not from rivals or police, but from within. When Desmond Murphy's older brother Ryan was gunned down outside the Twisted Shamrock, it wasn't just a son that Jack Murphy lost. It was his chosen successor. Suddenly Desmond, the bookish second son who preferred numbers to knee-breakings, found himself heir to a criminal enterprise he never wanted to lead. The solution came in an unexpected form, an arranged marriage to strengthen ties with their American cousins. Emma Donahue, daughter of Boston's Tommy Donahue, would cross the Atlantic to become a Murphy bride, a strategic alliance sealed in wedding vows. There was just one problem. The whispers about Emma had already reached Dublin long before she had. Plain as day, they said. Homely. A spinster by Boston standards. The kind of woman whose father had to ship her overseas with extra territory just to find her a husband. Desmond reluctantly agreed, prepared to sacrifice his freedom for family duty, expecting disappointment and awkwardness from a wife he assumed would be as unimpressive as the rumors suggested. What he couldn't possibly know was that Emma Donahue would prove to be nothing like the gossip, nothing like his expectations, and nothing like any woman the Dublin underworld had ever seen. This is the story of how an American-raised woman transformed not just her husband's perception, but an entire criminal empire, proving that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a woman isn't how she looks, but how clearly she sees. The rain fell in sheets across Dublin's north side, washing the soot-stained buildings in a perpetual gray veil that matched the mood inside Murphy's pub. Not the tourist trap Murphy's down in Temple Bar with its overpriced Guinness and fiddle players in fisherman sweaters, but the real Murphy's. A weathered establishment on the corner of a working-class street where conversations died when strangers entered, and deals worth more than most men's lives were sealed with nothing more than a nod and a handshake. Desmond Murphy sat alone in the back booth, the leather worn to a shine from 3 decades of his family holding court in this very spot. At 32, he had the lean build of a man who thought before he acted, and the watchful eyes of someone who'd grown up counting exits before hellos. His dark hair was cut expensively but without flash, his suit the same, quality that whispered rather than shouted, unlike the gold-laden soldiers who populated his father's ranks. "Your usual, Mr. Murphy." The question came from Mick, the barman who'd been pouring drinks since before Des was born. Without waiting for an answer, he set down a crystal tumbler with 2 fingers of Redbreast 12. "Thanks, Mick." Des took the glass but didn't drink. The amber liquid caught the dim light as he swirled it, watching the patterns form and dissolve like the thoughts he couldn't quite pin down. In 3 days, he'd be married to a woman he'd never met, all because his brother had been foolish enough to get himself killed 6 months ago. Ryan Murphy, the golden son, the heir apparent, the natural successor to Jack Murphy's criminal empire. Ryan, with his easy charm and quick fists, equally comfortable breaking a man's jaw or making a politician laugh. Ryan, who should have been smarter than to walk out of a pub without checking the street first. One moment of carelessness had cost him his life and changed the trajectory of Desmond's forever. "He's waiting for you upstairs." Mick's voice cut through Des's thoughts. No need to specify who he was. In this neighborhood, in this pub, there was only one he that mattered. Des drained his whiskey in a single swallow, the burn a welcome distraction. He straightened his tie, a habit left over from boarding school days, and made his way through the pub toward the narrow staircase in the back. The room quieted as he passed, conversations pausing, eyes following with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Everyone knew what was happening this week. Everyone had heard about the American bride. The upstairs office was a testament to Jack Murphy's particular brand of power. Understated, traditional, but unmistakable. Heavy oak furniture that had survived 2 world wars. Shelves lined with leather-bound books that had never been read. And behind the massive desk, a window overlooking the street below where nothing happened without Jack's knowledge or permission. Jack Murphy himself seemed part of the furniture. Solid, weathered, immovable. At 62, his once red hair had faded to steel gray, but the eyes that looked up from the ledger before him were as sharp as they'd been in his youth. Those eyes had ordered deaths, negotiated peace, and built an empire from the ruins of post-war Dublin. "You're late," Jack said, though they both knew he wasn't. Being accused of tardiness was simply Jack's way of establishing control from the outset. Traffic, Des replied, taking a seat without being invited. Small rebellions were all he allowed himself these days. Jack closed the ledger and leaned back in his chair. I spoke with Tommy Donahue this morning. They land tomorrow. The ceremony is set for Saturday at Street Brendan's. Father Mike has been compensated appropriately for the short notice. Des nodded, face carefully neutral. And the reception? Here. Private room. Just family and the inner circle. Jack's definition of family had always been flexible. Blood relatives, certainly, but also men who'd proven their loyalty over decades, whose secrets were so intertwined with the Murphys' that separation would destroy them both. Have you seen a picture of her? Des asked. The question that had been burning in his mind for weeks finally finding voice. Something flickered across Jack's face. Discomfort, perhaps, or pity. It's not about looks, Desmond. It's about the Boston connection. Tommy Donahue controls the docks from Southie to Charlestown. With the Doyle gang pushing at our territory and the guards getting brave with their new task force, we need the American pipeline more than ever. So you haven't seen her? It wasn't a question. Jack sighed. Reaching for the crystal decanter on his desk, he poured 2 measures, sliding one across to his son. I met her once, years ago. She was just a child then. Skinny thing. Unremarkable. And now, Tommy says she's capable, educated, runs his books. Jack took a sip of whiskey, choosing his next words carefully. The men who've come over from Boston, they say she's, well, not what you'd call a beauty. Plain, serious. Not like those painted girls you used to fancy at university. The confirmation of the rumors settled like a stone in Des's stomach. Not that he'd expected anything different. Why else would Tommy Donahue need to send his daughter across the ocean to find a husband? Why sweeten the deal with exclusive access to the Boston supply routes? A woman with options didn't need her marriage arranged at 28. I didn't realize my preferences were of such interest to Father's business associates, Des said, voice cooler than he intended. Jack's eyes hardened. Everything about you is of interest now. You're not the spare anymore, Desmond. You're the only Murphy heir left. Your preferences, your habits, your wife, it all reflects on our family, our strength. The unspoken comparison to Ryan hung in the air between them. Ryan, who would have accepted this arrangement without question. Ryan, who would have charmed his plain American bride and still kept a beautiful mistress in a flat in Ringsend. Ryan, who would never have disappointed their father with hesitation or doubt. The arrangement is made, Jack continued, his tone softening slightly. I know this isn't what you planned, but it's necessary. Emma Donahue comes with connections we need, loyalty we can trust, and blood that understands our world. Beauty fades, but family ties endure. Des finished his whiskey, setting the glass down with deliberate care. I'll do my duty. I always have. I know. For a moment, Jack looked older than his years, the weight of his position visible in the lines around his eyes. Your brother was meant to carry this family forward, but perhaps it's better this way. Ryan had strength, but you have foresight. Both are needed to survive in our world. It was the closest thing to approval Des had received since Ryan's death. Faint praise indeed, but still something to hold on to as he navigated the complex expectations of becoming the Murphy heir. As Des stood to leave, Jack added, one more thing. Whatever you think of her, whatever she looks like or how she acts, show respect. In public, she'll be a Murphy. Any insult to her is an insult to us all. Des nodded, understanding the directive for what it was. Not concern for Emma Donahue's feelings, but protection of the Murphy reputation. Appearance was everything in their world, even when appearances were rumored to be disappointing. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. Des walked slowly back through the pub, nodding to familiar faces, but stopping for no one. His mind was already calculating, adjusting, preparing, not just for a wedding, but for a fundamental recalibration of his life's trajectory. In 3 days, he would marry a stranger for the sake of family business. A plain, serious American who might strengthen their empire, but who represented the final nail in the coffin of any dreams he might have harbored about choosing his own path. Emma Donahue. Even her name sounded severe, practical. Des wondered briefly what she was thinking tonight. This woman being shipped across the Atlantic like cargo, to marry into a family whose reputation would have surely reached even Boston's shores. Was she as resigned to her fate as he was to his? Or did Emma Donahue harbor hopes that her practical, arranged marriage might somehow become something more? Either way, Saturday would reveal the truth, and there would be no turning back for either of them. They say she's got a face that would make a train take a dirt road. The comment came from Danny Quinn, Desmond's oldest friend and the closest thing the Murphy organization had to a consigliere for the younger generation. They sat in the private room above McGrath's tailor's, where Des was enduring his final fitting for a wedding suit he had no desire to wear. "Very helpful, Danny," Des replied dryly, as the tailor worked around him, pins clenched between his teeth as he marked the final adjustments. "Any other encouraging words about my future wife?" Danny grinned, sprawled in an armchair with the casual comfort of someone who'd known Des since they were stealing apples together at Street Joseph's primary. Unlike Des, who'd been sent to boarding school at 12, Danny had stayed in the neighborhood, climbing the ranks of the Murphy organization through a combination of loyalty, intelligence, and selective brutality when required. "Just repeating what I heard from Patty Byrne, who got it straight from one of the Boston lads." Danny shrugged, said she's smart though. Scary smart. Runs all her father's legitimate businesses and keeps the books clean enough to make a priest blush. "My father mentioned she was capable," Des said, lifting his arms as the tailor indicated. High praise indeed from Jack Murphy. "Capable women aren't exactly prized in our world," Danny pointed out. "Your mother accepted, of course." The mention of Mary Murphy brought a slight smile to Des's face. His mother, a formidable woman who had navigated the complexities of being married to Dublin's most powerful criminal with remarkable grace, had been notably silent about this arranged marriage. Her absence from the preparations spoke volumes about her opinion. "My mother thinks this entire arrangement is medieval," Des admitted. "She said as much to my father, though not in my presence." "And what do you think?" Danny's question was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Before Des could answer, the shop bell jangled downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. The tailor straightened immediately, pins disappearing into his pockets as he stepped back from Des with the instinctive caution of someone who recognized the sound of authority approaching. Jack Murphy entered without knocking, followed by Eddie Lynch, a police inspector whose salary from the Garda was supplemented generously by the Murphy organization. Lynch was red-faced and sweating slightly, his bulky frame uncomfortable in the confines of the tailor's fitting room. "Desmond, Daniel," Jack acknowledged them with a nod before turning to the tailor. "Give us the room, McGrath." The tailor disappeared with a bow that bordered on comical, pulling the door closed behind him. Des stepped down from the fitting platform, still wearing the half-pinned suit. "Problem?" he asked, reading the tension in his father's posture. "Change of plans," Jack said, his voice controlled but tight. "The Donahues arrived early. They're at the Grand Hotel now." Des felt his stomach tighten. "I thought they weren't coming until tomorrow." Tommy claims they caught an earlier flight due to weather concerns in Boston. Jack's tone made it clear he didn't entirely believe this explanation. More likely he wanted to catch us off guard, see how we operate when we're not putting on a show. It was a move Des might have appreciated under different circumstances. Strategic, calculating, the kind of thinking that kept families like theirs in power. But now it meant his carefully measured time before meeting his future wife had just evaporated. "Inspector Lynch here has information that makes this accelerated timeline even more complicated," Jack continued, gesturing to the policeman. Lynch cleared his throat, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Two agents from the American FBI landed at Dublin Airport this morning. Kevin Brady and Martin Collins. Brady's Boston Irish, been investigating your future father-in-law's operations for years without much success." "Why are they here?" Des asked, though he could already guess the answer. "Officially? Liaison work with the Garda on international organized crime," Lynch replied. "Unofficially? I'd bet my pension they're following the Donahue connection. A wedding between two crime families doesn't happen every day." Danny let out a low whistle. "Perfect. FBI surveillance at the wedding. Just what we need." Jack's expression darkened. "Which is why we need to move quickly. The wedding will proceed as planned on Saturday, but we need to establish the narrative immediately. This isn't just a business arrangement. It's a love match. A legitimate marriage between two legitimate business families with deep community ties." Des stared at his father incredulously. "A love match? 3 days before a wedding to a woman I've never met? Who's going to believe that?" "They'll believe it because we'll make them believe it," Jack said firmly. "Starting with dinner tonight. You'll meet Emma at the hotel, escort her to Donovan's for a romantic meal, where you'll be seen by enough people to start the right rumors. Danny, you'll organize discreet security, nothing obvious that would tip off the feds. The room fell silent as Des absorbed the implications. Not only was he being forced into this marriage sooner than expected, but now he had to pretend to be in love with a woman rumored to be plain at best, homely at worst, all while under potential FBI surveillance. And if Emma isn't cooperative with this narrative? Des asked carefully. Jack's smile was cold. Tommy assures me his daughter understands family obligations. She'll play her part. When Jack and Lynch had gone, leaving instructions for Des to be at the Grand Hotel by 7, Danny let out a long breath. Well, that complicates things. Des began carefully removing the wedding suit, his movements precise and controlled despite the storm of emotions beneath. I need you to find out everything you can about these FBI agents. Their histories, their methods, who they're connecting with in the Garda. Already on it, Danny assured him. What about tonight? How are you going to convince anyone this is a love match when you've never laid eyes on the woman? Des folded his tie with methodical attention, buying time to steady his voice. I spent 3 years at university, acting like I cared about Shakespeare and rugby. I can certainly act like I'm interested in Emma Donahue for one dinner. Danny studied his friend's face. It's not just dinner, though, is it? It's a life. Your life. From Saturday forward. The reality of it settled over Des like a physical weight. Not just a business arrangement now, but a performance that would need to be maintained indefinitely. A marriage built on a foundation of necessity and lies. To a woman he couldn't even picture clearly in his mind. One step at a time, Des said finally, buttoning his shirt with the same careful precision he applied to everything in his life. First dinner, then the wedding. After that, he trailed off, unwilling to look too far ahead into a future that seemed increasingly constrained. After that, you'll do what you always do, Danny finished for him. Adapt, calculate, survive. Des managed a tight smile. Someone has to. As he left the tailor's shop, stepping into the weak Dublin sunshine, Des couldn't help but wonder if Emma Donahue was receiving similar instructions from her father. Was she being coached on how to appear besotted with a man she'd never met? Was she dreading this charade as much as he was? Or perhaps, coming from Boston's Irish underworld, Emma Donahue was already accustomed to performing whatever role was required of her. If the rumors about her appearance were true, she'd likely had more practice than most at accepting disappointments and limited options. Either way, in a few hours he would know. The bride was no longer coming. She was here, and the performance of Desmond Murphy's life was about to begin. The Grand Hotel stood on the edge of Dublin's Georgian district, its Victorian facade a reminder of more elegant times. As Desmond's car pulled up to the entrance, he found himself oddly nervous, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his first collection run at 18. He straightened his tie in the rearview mirror, noting with detachment that he'd chosen his most conservative one, as if dressing for a funeral rather than meeting his future wife. I'll circle the block, his driver, Connor, said quietly. Call if you need an early extraction. Des almost smiled at the terminology, the same words they used for pulling someone out of a dangerous situation. Perhaps that wasn't far from the truth. The hotel lobby was all polished marble and crystal chandeliers, the kind of neutral luxury that catered to international businessmen and wealthy tourists. Des spotted Tommy Donahue's security immediately. 2 broad-shouldered men with American-cut suits and the vigilant eyes of trained guards. They clocked him as he entered but made no move to intercept, which meant they'd been briefed on his appearance. At the reception desk, Des gave his name and mentioned he was meeting the Donahue party. The clerk's eyes widened slightly. Clearly, the staff had been made aware of their important guests. Mr. Donahue is expecting you in the Wellington suite, sir. 5th floor. As the elevator ascended, Des mentally reviewed what little he knew about Tommy Donahue, a second-generation Irish-American who had transformed his father's small-time bootlegging operation into a sophisticated network controlling much of Boston's waterfront. Known for being calculating rather than violent, though capable of both when necessary. A widower with 2 children, Emma and her younger brother Jamie, and soon his father-in-law. The Wellington suite door was opened by one of the American guards before Des could even knock. Inside, the expansive sitting room was arranged like a command center. A man Des assumed was Jamie Donahue stood by the window, phone to his ear, while 2 associates worked at laptops at the dining table. Tommy Donahue rose from an armchair by the fireplace. In his 60s, he had the compact build of a former boxer and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. His handshake was firm, his Boston accent prominent as he spoke. Desmond Murphy. Finally, we meet properly. Last time I saw you, you were just a boy visiting your mother's cousins in Boston. Des had no recollection of this meeting but nodded respectfully. Mr. Donahue, welcome to Dublin. I hope your journey was comfortable. Tommy gestured to the chair opposite his. Cut the formal crap, son. We're about to be family. Call me Tommy. As Des took a seat, he noted the absence of any women in the room. I understood your daughter arrived with you. Emma's freshening up. Long flight. Tommy signaled to one of his men, who promptly brought over 2 glasses of whiskey. Irish, of course. When in Rome, they touched glasses in a perfunctory toast. Des took a small sip, keeping his wits about him. My father mentioned the change in your arrival schedule. Any particular reason? Tommy's smile didn't reach his eyes. Weather concerns, like I told Jack. Nothing more complicated than that. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Des let it pass. The game of information and control between their families had begun, and he needed to choose his battles carefully. I've arranged dinner at Donovan's, Des said. It's one of the finest restaurants in the city. Good. Emma appreciates quality. Tommy set down his glass. Before she joins us, let's be clear about expectations. This marriage is important for both our families. The Murphys get access to our Boston distribution network, protection from certain American legal entanglements, and fresh capital for expansion. We get a foothold in Europe and the security of a powerful alliance. And your daughter? Des couldn't help asking. What does she get? Something flickered in Tommy's expression. Pride, perhaps, or concern. Emma gets what all women in our world ultimately want. Security, status, and a place in a powerful family. She understands her role. Before Des could respond, a door on the far side of the suite opened. Jamie Donahue ended his phone call abruptly, and Tommy stood up. Des followed suit, turning toward the bedroom door with a carefully neutral expression, braced for his first glimpse of the woman he would marry in 3 days. The rumors had prepared him for disappointment, for plainness, for awkwardness, for a woman whose appearance explained why she remained unmarried at 28. The rumors had not prepared him for Emma Donahue. She wasn't beautiful, not in the conventional sense that populated Dublin's high-end nightclubs or graced the arms of wealthy men, but neither was she the homely spinster he'd been led to expect. Emma Donahue was striking. Tall and slender, with chestnut hair cut in a practical shoulder-length style, she moved with a deliberate grace that suggested complete self-possession. Her features were strong rather than delicate, intelligent eyes, a determined mouth, high cheekbones that caught the light. She wore a simple navy dress that was neither fashionable nor dowdy, just impeccably tailored. No jewelry except a small pair of pearl earrings. No makeup beyond the basics. Everything about her presentation said, I am not here to be decorative. Emma, Tommy said, gesturing toward Des. This is Desmond Murphy. She crossed the room and extended her hand, her grip as firm and confident as her father's had been. Mr. Murphy, thank you for the warm Dublin welcome. Her voice surprised him, lower than expected, with just a hint of the Boston accent that colored her father's speech. Her American upbringing was evident, but subtly so. Please, call me Des, he replied automatically, suddenly aware that he was staring. I hope your journey wasn't too tiring. Nothing I couldn't handle. Her smile was polite but reserved. Up close, he could see that her eyes were an unusual shade, amber flecked with green, observant, and unnerving in their directness. I understand we're dining out this evening? Donovan's, Des confirmed, one of our finest. Excellent. She turned to her father. I'll need 15 minutes. It wasn't a question or a request. Tommy nodded, and Emma disappeared back into the bedroom with the same purposeful movement with which she'd entered. When she'd gone, Des became aware of the expectant looks from both Donahue men. He realized they were waiting for his reaction, his assessment of his future bride. Well? Tommy asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Des chose his words carefully. Your daughter seems composed. Jamie Donahue snorted softly, but Tommy nodded in apparent approval. Emma's always been practical, focused, not one for frivolities or drama. She'll make a good partner in your position. The word choice was telling, partner, not wife. It suggested Emma was being presented as an asset to the business, not merely a decorative addition to the Murphy household. I look forward to getting to know her better over dinner, Des said diplomatically, though in truth he found himself genuinely curious about the woman behind that composed exterior. She wasn't what he'd expected. Neither the plain, awkward spinster of rumor, nor the sort of woman who typically caught his eye. Emma Donahue was something else entirely, a puzzle he couldn't immediately categorize, and that was intriguing. Exactly 15 minutes later, Emma reappeared, now wearing a simple coat and carrying a small handbag. No grand entrance, no fuss, just precise timing and quiet efficiency. "Shall we?" she asked, looking directly at Desmond. As they left the hotel together, Des was acutely aware of the performance beginning, the public debut of their supposed romance, staged for the benefit of both their families and any watching FBI agents. He offered Emma his arm as they descended the hotel steps, and after the briefest hesitation, she took it. Her touch was light but firm, like everything else about her. Walking beside Emma Donahue, Des realized the rumors had been wrong, but not in the way he'd expected. The problem wasn't that Emma was plain or unattractive. The problem was that she was impossible to ignore. Donovan's restaurant occupied the ground floor of a restored Georgian building on a quiet street away from the main tourist areas. Its discretion was part of its appeal for Dublin's elite. Politicians, wealthy businessmen, and the more sophisticated elements of the city's criminal hierarchy all dined here, secure in the knowledge that privacy was paramount and eavesdropping impossible. Desmond guided Emma through the entrance with a light hand at the small of her back, a gesture calculated to appear intimate without being presumptuous. The maitre d' recognized Des immediately, his professional smile warming with genuine respect. "Mr. Murphy, wonderful to see you again. Your table is ready." They were led to a corner table partially screened by an arrangement of fresh flowers, offering both privacy and a clear view of the restaurant's entrance, a security consideration that Des noted Emma immediately recognized, her amber eyes scanning the room with subtle efficiency before she took her seat. Once they were alone with menus and water had been poured, an awkward silence descended. The practiced social niceties that had carried them from the hotel suddenly seemed inadequate for this more intimate setting. Emma broke the silence first. "I assume we're being watched?" The directness caught Des off guard. "Possibly. My father believes the FBI agents who arrived this morning might be surveilling your family." Emma nodded, unsurprised. "Kevin Brady. He's been trying to build a case against my father for years. Never got close. You know him personally? We've met at charity functions." A hint of amusement touched her lips. Boston is a small world in certain circles. Des studied her with new interest. Most women in their world, wives, girlfriends, daughters, were carefully sheltered from law enforcement interactions. That Emma not only knew Brady by name but had encountered him socially suggested her role in the Donahue organization was more integrated than he'd assumed. "Your father mentioned you handle the books for his legitimate businesses," Des said, testing the waters. Emma's expression revealed nothing, among other things. "What other things?" She took a sip of water before answering. "Mr. Murphy." "Des," he corrected gently. "Des," she amended. "We're both aware this isn't a normal getting-to-know-you dinner. We're marrying in 3 days, regardless of whether we enjoy each other's company or not. Perhaps we could dispense with the polite fiction that this is anything other than a business arrangement?" The waiter approached, temporarily halting their conversation. Des ordered for both of them in fluent Irish, a choice that earned him a raised eyebrow from Emma. "Engage?" she asked when the waiter had gone. "I wouldn't have expected that from Dublin's criminal air." "My mother insisted," Des explained, surprised by her recognition of the language. "She believed we should understand our heritage beyond just exploiting its more profitable aspects." "My grandmother felt the same," Emma replied, "though most of what she taught me would be considered rather old-fashioned by modern Irish speakers." Another assumption shattered. The supposedly plain, sheltered American girl spoke Irish, or at least understood it. "You were saying," Des prompted, returning to their interrupted conversation, "about dispensing with polite fictions." Emma folded her hands on the table, her posture businesslike. "You want to know what I do beyond keeping legitimate books. I want to know what my role will be beyond wearing a wedding ring and appearing at appropriate functions. Rather than waste time with social niceties, perhaps we could simply exchange the information that actually matters." Des found himself smiling despite the bluntness of her approach, or perhaps because of it. After years of navigating the coded language and hidden meanings of Dublin's criminal elite, there was something refreshing about direct speech. "Fair enough," he agreed. "What would you like to know?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Will I be expected to be merely decorative, or will I have actual responsibilities? Will I have access to the organization's financial information? Will I be consulted on business decisions that affect my future? And most importantly, Will I be allowed to continue my own operations? Or am I expected to abandon everything I've built in Boston? The series of questions revealed more about Emma Donahue than any dossier could have. This wasn't a woman being reluctantly traded in a business arrangement. This was someone with her own agenda, her own operations, her own power base that she had no intention of surrendering. Your own operations, Des repeated, genuinely curious now. Beyond your father's legitimate businesses, something flashed in Emma's eyes. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. I have certain, specialized interests that generate independent income. Nothing that conflicts with family business, but separate from it. Before Des could press for details, their first course arrived. Smoked salmon with brown bread, presented with the understated elegance that was Donovan's hallmark. The interruption gave him time to recalibrate his approach. To answer your questions, he said when they were alone again. My family's expectations and mine may differ. My father likely envisions a traditional role, social appearances, hosting appropriate gatherings, producing heirs eventually, limited access to sensitive information, no operational input. Emma's expression cooled noticeably. And your expectations? Des considered his response carefully, aware that this moment might set the tone for their entire relationship. I believe unused resources are wasted resources. If you have skills and connections valuable to our combined interests, it would be foolish to sideline them because of traditional gender roles. He watched her reaction, noting the slight relaxation in her shoulders, even as her expression remained guarded. That's progressive of you. Not progressive, practical. Des took a bite of salmon, giving himself time to organize his thoughts. My brother Ryan was the traditional heir. Charming, physical, commanding. I've always operated differently. More analytical, more strategic. I recognize similar qualities in you. Emma studied him with those unsettling amber eyes, as if reassessing his place in her calculations. Most men in your position would be threatened by a wife with her own agenda. Most men in my position wouldn't have spent years being underestimated because they preferred numbers to violence, Des countered. I recognize the strategic advantage of being underestimated. I suspect you do as well. For the first time, a genuine smile touched Emma's lips, small but transformative, bringing a warmth to her features that the composed mask had hidden. In Boston, they call me Tommy's bookish daughter, the plain one who couldn't find a husband. Convenient assumptions that have served me well. The admission was revealing, not just in its content, but in the fact that she offered it at all. Sensed an opening, a potential bridge between their separate worlds. And what will they call you in Dublin, I wonder? He asked. Emma's smile shifted to something more calculated, more reminiscent of her father. That depends entirely on the story we choose to tell, doesn't it? The dutiful American bride. The plain spinster lucky to catch Dublin's most eligible criminal bachelor? Or something else entirely? As their main courses arrived, lamb for him, fish for her, Des realized that the rumors hadn't merely undersold Emma Donahue's appearance. They had fundamentally misrepresented who and what she was. This wasn't a plain, passive woman being traded in a business arrangement. This was someone with her own agenda, her own ambitions, and a carefully cultivated image that served purposes he was only beginning to glimpse. The question wasn't whether Emma Donahue would fit into the Murphy organization. The question was how the Murphy organization would adapt to Emma Donahue. The Murphy estate sat on 3 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds in Howth, overlooking Dublin Bay. The main house, a Victorian manor renovated with no expense spared, stood as a physical manifestation of Jack Murphy's rise from the tenements of North Dublin to the pinnacle of criminal power, ostentatious enough to impress, but with the patina of old money that legitimized new wealth. As the car passed through the wrought iron gates, Emma observed the property with the same careful attention she'd shown at dinner the previous night. Not admiring, not intimidated, assessing. The security seems comprehensive, she noted, indicating the cameras discreetly positioned along the stone wall. My father values his privacy, Des replied, watching her reaction. The grounds are patrolled 24 hours. The house itself has a separate internal system, Emma nodded approvingly. Similar to our place in Milton. Though I imagine maintaining this level of security is more challenging in Ireland than in Massachusetts. The car circled the fountain at the center of the gravel drive and stopped before the main entrance. Before the driver could open their doors, the heavy oak front door swung open to reveal Mary Murphy, Des's mother, framed in the doorway like a portrait of Irish aristocracy. At 60, Mary retained the striking looks that had once made her the most sought-after woman in North Dublin. Her silver-streaked dark hair was swept into an elegant knot, her posture regal without appearing stiff. Unlike Jack, who wore his power like armor, Mary carried hers with the ease of someone who had never questioned her right to it. "You must be Emma," she said, stepping forward with hands extended in greeting. Her Dublin accent was softened by education, her smile polite but reserved. "Welcome to our home." Emma accepted the older woman's hands with appropriate deference. "Mrs. Murphy, thank you for your hospitality." "Mary, please. We're to be family after all." The words were warm, the tone less so, a social nicety rather than genuine sentiment. Mary turned to her son, her expression softening. "Desmond, your father is expecting you in his study." Des hesitated, glancing between the two women. "Perhaps I should show Emma to her rooms first." "Nonsense. I'll take care of our guest." Mary's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "The housekeeper has prepared the blue suite for Emma until after the ceremony." The message wasn't subtle. Until the wedding, Emma would be housed separately from Des, traditional proprieties observed regardless of the arranged nature of their union. Des seemed about to object, then thought better of it. "I won't be long," he told Emma, his voice low. "My mother knows this house better than anyone. You're in good hands." When he was gone, Mary's smile remained firmly in place as she gestured Emma inside. "You must be exhausted after your journey. Tea in the drawing room first, I think, then I'll show you to your rooms." The interior of the Murphy home was exactly as Emma had expected. Traditional luxury with tasteful modern updates, every piece of furniture and art selected to convey both wealth and discernment. Family photographs were noticeably absent from public spaces, as was typical in homes where business often crossed the line into illegality. Nothing personal on display that might humanize the inhabitants to potential enemies. The drawing room featured tall windows overlooking the bay, the view spectacular even on this overcast day. A tea service waited on a low table before the fireplace, where a small fire took the edge off the persistent Irish damp. "Your home is beautiful," Emma said as she took the seat Mary indicated. "The view alone must be worth a fortune." "It is," Mary agreed simply, pouring tea with practiced grace. "Jack bought this place 20 years ago, after the previous owner encountered some financial difficulties." The slight pause suggested the difficulties had been engineered rather than accidental. "Sugar? Lemon?" "Neither, thank you." Emma accepted the cup, noting the fine-bone china. Belique if she wasn't mistaken, and likely antique. Mary settled back in her chair, studying Emma with undisguised interest. "I must admit, you're not what I expected." Emma sipped her tea, unsurprised by the direct approach. "Oh? And what did you expect, Mrs. Murphy?" "Mary," the older woman corrected automatically. "The reports we received suggested someone more conventional, less composed." "Plainer, you mean?" Emma stated without inflection. "Less attractive." Mary didn't deny it. Information is currency in our world, as I'm sure you know. Sometimes that information is deliberately distorted. Emma set down her cup with delicate precision. "By my father, you mean?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps by you." Mary's shrewd gaze never wavered. "A woman who appears less threatening than she is gains certain advantages." It was a perspective few in Emma's experience had articulated so clearly, an understanding that appearances could be tactical rather than merely vain. Emma found herself reassessing Des's mother, seeing beyond the elegant exterior to the strategic mind beneath. "My appearance is what it is," Emma said carefully. "People's perceptions of it are their own affair." Mary's smile turned a shade more genuine. "A diplomatic answer." She leaned forward slightly. "Let me be direct, Emma. My son is in a difficult position. Ryan's death thrust him into a role he never wanted and wasn't groomed for. Jack believes this marriage will stabilize both families' interests, and perhaps it will. But I care less about family interests than I do about my son." "What are you asking me?" "I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you that while Desmond presents himself as the analytical, controlled son, he has depths that aren't immediately apparent. He feels deeply, even when he appears detached. If this arrangement is to work beyond mere business, you would do well to remember that." The warning, or was it advice, hung between them as Mary rose smoothly to her feet. "Come, I'll show you to your rooms." The blue suite proved to be a connected bedroom and sitting room on the east wing of the house, decorated in shades of navy and cream, with tasteful antique furniture. Emma's luggage had already been unpacked, Her clothes hung with careful attention in the mahogany wardrobe. "The staff have been instructed to provide whatever you need," Mary said, moving to the windows to adjust the heavy drapes. "Mrs. Casey is our housekeeper. She's been with us for 30 years and knows how this household functions. If you have special requirements, she's the one to ask." Emma took in the space. Comfortable, elegant, but clearly temporary. Guest quarters, not a permanent residence. "Thank you. It's lovely." Mary paused at the door. "Dinner is at 7. Formal, I'm afraid. Jack is having some associates over to meet you." She hesitated, then added with unexpected gentleness, "The first days are always the hardest. It gets easier, learning to navigate a new family's waters." When she was gone, Emma moved methodically through the rooms, checking for surveillance devices out of professional habit rather than specific suspicion. Finding none, she sat at the delicate writing desk by the window, removed a small notebook from her handbag, and began to write observations, impressions, assessments of the Murphy household and its dynamics. The blue suite might be temporary, but Emma Donahue had learned long ago that information was the foundation of influence. And in this new household, with its complex undercurrents and unstated expectations, influence would be essential to survival. Outside her window, gray clouds gathered over Dublin Bay, promising rain by evening. Emma watched their approach with calm detachment, mentally preparing for the formal dinner ahead, the next stage in her careful introduction to Dublin's criminal aristocracy. This was just the beginning. The first careful steps into territory that was simultaneously foreign and strangely familiar. Different players, different accents, but the same fundamental game she had mastered in Boston. Power perception and the careful management of both. Dinner at the Murphy estate proved to be exactly what Emma had anticipated, a carefully orchestrated demonstration of power disguised as hospitality. Jack Murphy held court at the head of the mahogany table that dominated the formal dining room, with Des at the opposite end and Emma positioned at his right. The guests, 6 men representing various elements of the Murphy organization, had been selected to impress upon Emma the scope and reach of her future family's influence. There was Patrick Walsh, the police inspector whose jovial manner barely concealed a predatory intelligence. James Keenan, a silver-haired banker whose legitimate facade concealed decades of money laundering expertise. Michael Flaherty, who controlled the dockworkers' union with an iron grip beneath his affable exterior. And 3 of Jack's closest lieutenants, men who had helped build the Murphy empire through loyalty and calculated violence. Throughout the 5-course meal, Emma played her part with practiced precision. Attentive but not overeager, respectful without being deferential, offering just enough of herself to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything substantive. It was a performance she had refined over years of representing her father at Boston functions, the careful balance of being simultaneously visible and forgettable. Only Des seemed to notice the calculation behind her social grace, his observant eyes occasionally meeting hers with a hint of recognition when she deflected a too personal question or redirected a potentially revealing conversation. By the time dessert was served, an elaborate confection of pastry and seasonal berries, Emma had compiled a mental dossier on each man present, cataloging weaknesses, allegiances, and potential leverage points through nothing more than attentive listening and careful observation. "Your father mentioned you have a head for figures, Emma," Jack said as coffee was poured, his tone suggesting polite interest rather than genuine curiosity. A useful skill in any household. The dismissive framing wasn't subtle. Emma smiled pleasantly, recognizing the test embedded in the comment. "Numbers have always made sense to me. More reliable than words, in many cases." Jack nodded, seemingly satisfied with this appropriately modest response. "Desmond shares that aptitude. Perhaps you can help him with the household accounts once you're settled." From anyone else, the suggestion would have been merely patronizing. From Jack Murphy, it was a deliberate diminishment, a public relegation to domestic concerns rather than business matters. Before Emma could respond, the evening was interrupted by the arrival of Danny Quinn, Des's lieutenant, who entered the dining room with the confident familiarity of someone who bypassed normal protocols. He moved directly to Des, bending to whisper something in his ear that transformed Des's expression from polite attention to sharp focus. Des stood immediately. "Excuse me. A matter requires my attention." His eyes met Emma's briefly. "Please continue without me." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as Des followed Danny from the dining room. Jack's expression tightened with barely suppressed irritation. while the guests exchanged meaningful glances that suggested this was an unusual disruption. "More coffee, everyone?" Mary Murphy stepped smoothly into the awkward moment, her social grace masking whatever concerns she might have about her son's abrupt departure. 20 minutes later, as the dinner party moved to the drawing room for digestives, Emma excused herself with a delicate mention of travel fatigue. Rather than heading upstairs to the blue suite, however, she followed the faint sound of voices to a closed door near the back of the house. She didn't knock. Knocking would have given them time to compose themselves, to present a carefully edited version of whatever was happening. Instead, Emma turned the handle quietly and stepped into what appeared to be Jack Murphy's private office. Des stood beside a large desk covered with ledgers and papers, his dinner jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up as he gestured at something in one of the open books. Danny Quinn occupied a chair opposite, while a third man, older, gray-haired, spectacles perched on a beak-like nose, hunched over the largest ledger with obvious distress. All three men looked up at her entrance, expressions ranging from surprise, the older man, to calculation, Danny, to something unreadable, Des. "Emma," Des straightened, his tone carefully neutral. "You should be with the others." "Clearly," she replied, closing the door behind her, "but I thought this might be more interesting." She moved toward the desk, her eyes taking in the scattered papers. Financial records, from what she could see, columns of numbers and dates. "You have a problem." It wasn't a question. The tension in the room, the disarray of documents, the late-night urgency all pointed to a situation beyond routine business. Danny Quinn shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Donahue, this is private family business, which I'll be part of in 2 days." Emma finished for him, her tone pleasant but firm. "And if I'm not mistaken, you're looking at a discrepancy in the import accounts, specifically." She tilted her head to read the upside-down ledger. "The shipments through Liverpool." The room fell silent. The older man with the spectacles looked at Des with alarm, while Danny's expression shifted from discomfort to wary assessment. Des studied Emma for a long moment, then made a decision. "Emma Donahue, meet Howard Brennan, our accountant for the past 30 years. He gestured to the papers spread across the desk. "And yes, we have a problem with the Liverpool accounts. 3 shipments paid for, only 2 received, and a rather significant sum of money unaccounted for." Emma moved closer to the desk, scanning the open ledgers with practiced efficiency. "May I?" After a brief hesitation, Des nodded. Emma picked up the main ledger, flipping back several pages with the confident movements of someone accustomed to financial forensics. Her eyes moved rapidly over the columns, fingers occasionally tracing a particular entry. "The discrepancy didn't start with Liverpool," she said after several minutes of focused examination. "It begins here 3 months ago, with the Glasgow route." She turned the book toward them, pointing to a specific line of figures. "Someone's been skimming small amounts from multiple shipments, then covered it with a larger discrepancy that would draw attention away from the pattern." Howard Brennan adjusted his spectacles nervously. "That's impossible. I reconcile these accounts personally." "Not impossible," Emma corrected gently. "Just well concealed. Look here, and here." She indicated several entries. "The amounts are disguised within legitimate operational expenses, but they follow a pattern. 5%, never more, spread across multiple categories to avoid detection." Des moved to stand beside her, close enough that Emma could smell the faint scent of his cologne mingled with the whiskey from dinner. He studied the entries she indicated, his expression shifting from skepticism to dawning recognition. "Who has access to these books?" Emma asked, her tone purely professional now. "Besides Howard. Myself, my father, and Colin Murray, our logistics manager," Des replied, his mind clearly racing ahead. "Murray handles all northern shipping routes, including Liverpool and Glasgow." Emma nodded, processing this information. "How long has he worked for your family?" 15 years, Danny supplied. "Came highly recommended from the Doyle organization after a territory dispute was settled. Jack trusted him with increasingly sensitive operations." "The Doyles." Emma set down the ledger. "The same Doyles who've been pressing at your territory recently?" The implication hung in the air between them. Des's expression hardened as he made the connection. A long game. Plant someone, build trust, then use them to undermine operations from within. "While skimming enough to make it personally profitable," Emma added. "Classic infiltration tactic." Howard Brennan looked stricken, clearly realizing the implications for his own position. "Mr. Murphy, I swear I had no idea." "Of course not, Howard." Des assured him, though his tone suggested the accountant's future scrutiny would be significantly more rigorous. You were looking at the trees, not the forest. An understandable oversight. Emma turned to Des, her voice low and direct. The question now is how you handle this information. Confronting Murray directly tips your hand to the Doyles, but leaving him in place risks further compromise. Des studied her with newfound appreciation, recognizing that she had seamlessly shifted from outsider to strategic partner in the space of minutes. The transformation was remarkable. The composed, socially appropriate dinner guest replaced by a sharp-minded tactician who spoke the language of criminal enterprise fluently. We'll need to feed him controlled information, Des said thoughtfully. Use him to mislead the Doyles while we secure the actual shipments through alternative channels. Emma nodded in agreement, while quietly investigating how deep the infiltration goes. Murray likely isn't working alone. Danny Quinn watched this exchange with poorly concealed astonishment, his gaze shifting between them as if witnessing something unprecedented, which, in the context of the Murphy organization, it was a woman not merely observing but actively participating in operational strategy. Des turned to Danny. Have Murray followed, discreetly. I want to know everyone he talks to, everywhere he goes. To Howard, prepare a separate set of books. Show Murray only what we want the Doyles to see. As they continued strategizing, Emma stepped slightly back, watching Des take command of the situation with quiet authority. This wasn't the reluctant air she'd been led to expect, but a man with natural leadership instincts tempered by analytical precision. Just as she wasn't the plain, passive bride the rumors had described. They had both been underestimated, it seemed. By others, certainly, but perhaps also by each other. When Des finally looked up from the plans being made, his eyes found Emma's with a new awareness, not just of her capabilities, but of the unexpected alignment of their minds. Thank you, he said simply, for seeing what we missed. Emma inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the gratitude without false modesty. Perhaps this marriage will be more practical than either of us anticipated. A practical arrangement, indeed. But as they returned to their separate rooms later that night, both sensed that something had fundamentally shifted between them, something that transcended mere business convenience. They had glimpsed in each other something rare in their world, a true partner, rather than merely an ally of convenience. The wedding day dawned gray and misty, typical Dublin weather that cast Street Brendan's church in a soft, ethereal light. The ceremony itself was brief but dignified, with Father Mike officiating before a carefully selected gathering of family members and business associates. Emma wore an elegant ivory suit rather than a traditional gown, pearl earrings her only adornment. Des matched her understated approach in a tailored charcoal suit, his composure betrayed only by the occasional tightening of his jaw. They spoke their vows clearly, exchanged simple gold bands, and sealed their union with a chaste kiss that nevertheless sent an unexpected current through both of them, a momentary connection that went beyond the choreographed performance they'd prepared. The reception at Murphy's pub was equally restrained. Expensive whiskey flowing freely, traditional music played by musicians who were paid well to notice nothing, and the careful mingling of Boston and Dublin criminal aristocracy under the watchful eyes of both patriarchs. Through it all, Emma maintained her composed facade, playing the role of satisfied bride with just enough warmth to be convincing without overplaying her hand. By early evening, when they finally returned to the Murphy estate as husband and wife, exhaustion had settled into Emma's bones. Not just physical fatigue, but the deep weariness that came from maintaining constant vigilance in unfamiliar territory. Your things have been moved to the East Wing, Des informed her as they entered the main hall. We have the entire floor to ourselves. My father and mother occupy the West Wing. Emma nodded, appreciating the information for what it was. Not just logistics, but a mapping of territorial boundaries within the household. Thank you. An awkward silence fell between them. Despite the legal formality they had just completed, they remained essentially strangers, business partners thrust into an intimacy neither had chosen. I have some matters to attend to, Des said finally. The Murray situation requires careful handling. You should rest. It's been a long day. Emma recognized the escape hatch he was offering both of them. The wedding night neither expected nor particularly wanted could be deferred under the guise of business necessities. Of course. I have some correspondence to manage myself. Relief flickered briefly in Des's eyes, followed by something that might have been gratitude. I'll show you to our rooms first. The East Wing suite proved to be a significant upgrade from the blue guest rooms. spacious, tastefully appointed, with connected his and hers dressing rooms flanking a large bedroom. Emma's possessions had been arranged with meticulous care. Her clothes hung in the walnut armoire, her personal items arranged on the vanity. "The sitting room through there can serve as your private office," Des explained, indicating a door on the far side of the bedroom. "I've had a desk and secure telephone line installed." The consideration surprised Emma. "You thought of everything." "I tried to anticipate what you might need." Des's tone was carefully neutral, but Emma sensed the effort behind the arrangements. A genuine attempt to make her feel welcomed despite the arranged nature of their union. "Thank you," she said simply. "It's more than I expected." Something unspoken passed between them then, an acknowledgement of their strange situation, and the efforts both were making to navigate it with dignity. Des inclined his head slightly, then left her to settle in, closing the bedroom door softly behind him. Emma spent the next hour methodically reorganizing her new space, not because the staff had done a poor job, but because the physical activity helped her process the day's events, while familiarizing herself with her new surroundings. She was hanging the last of her dresses when a sharp knock at the main door interrupted her thoughts. Before she could respond, Danny Quinn burst into the room, his usual composure noticeably absent. "Where's Des?" he demanded, then seemed to register that he was speaking to the new Mrs. Murphy. "Apologies, Mrs. Emma. I need to find Desmond urgently." He mentioned attending to the Murray situation, Emma replied, instantly alert to the tension radiating from Danny. "What's happened?" Danny hesitated, clearly torn between the urgency of his mission and the ingrained habit of excluding women from operational matters. "Whatever it is, you'll save time by telling me now rather than searching the house," Emma pointed out pragmatically. Danny made his decision. "Murray's disappeared. The man we had watching him found his car abandoned near the docks. Blood on the driver's seat." Emma absorbed this information with practiced calm. "That's unexpected. Murray seemed too valuable as an inside man for the Doyles to eliminate him. Unless they discovered we were onto him," Danny suggested grimly. "Or unless this is misdirection," Emma countered, her mind racing through possibilities. "The timing is suspicious. Our wedding day, when security attention would be divided." Understanding dawned in Danny's expression. A diversion. Emma was already moving, slipping off her heels and reaching for more practical footwear. "We need to find Des immediately. Have you checked his study?" "First place I looked." 3 days after the attack, Desmond Murphy sat propped against pillows in the East Wing bedroom, a laptop balanced on his knees, and a barely touched cup of tea cooling on the nightstand. The gash at his temple had been neatly stitched by Dr. Whalen, and though the concussion symptoms were subsiding, he remained pale and irritable with enforced inactivity. "You should be resting," Emma observed from the doorway, a folder tucked under her arm. She'd spent most of the morning in what had rapidly become her operational headquarters, the sitting room Des had designated as her office, now transformed with additional computer equipment and file boxes containing financial records dating back 5 years. Des looked up, his expression a mixture of frustration and reluctant amusement. "I've rested for 3 days. Any more rest and I'll lose my mind entirely." He gestured to the laptop. "Besides, I'm not exactly running marathons." Emma approached, noting the financial spreadsheets displayed on his screen with approval. "Making progress?" "Some." Des shifted, making space for her on the edge of the bed, an unconscious gesture of inclusion that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. Murray's accounts were deliberately complex, designed to obscure rather than clarify. Classic misdirection. "That fits with what we've learned." Emma settled beside him, opening her folder to reveal a series of photographs. "Murray's body was found this morning near Wicklow. Made to look like a gangland execution, but the details are wrong. Too neat, too obvious." Des studied the crime scene photos with clinical detachment. Professional hit disguised as amateur work. Exactly. Emma withdrew another document from her folder, a preliminary autopsy report obtained through channels she hadn't fully explained. He was already dead when placed there, killed elsewhere, likely the night before our wedding. Which means whoever attacked me wasn't Murray. Des reached up absently to touch his stitched wound, wincing slightly. "A third party, working for the Doyles but not directly connected to them," Emma agreed, creating layers of deniability. Murray was sacrificed once his usefulness ended. Specifically, when we discovered his role in the financial discrepancies, they fell into companionable silence, each processing the implications of this latest development. Over the past 3 days, a partnership had formed between them, forged in crisis and strengthened by their complementary skills. Emma had seamlessly stepped into a coordination role during Dez's recovery, liaising with Danny Quinn and other Murphy lieutenants with a natural authority that had surprised everyone except perhaps Dez himself. "Your father called again," Emma said after a moment, her tone carefully neutral. "He's insisting on seeing you." Dez's expression hardened. "And you held him off?" "I explained that Dr. Whelan advised minimal disruption." Emma's lips curved in the barest hint of a smile. Mary was surprisingly supportive of this medical directive. Dez gave a short laugh that held genuine amusement. "My mother recognizing a useful alliance. Wonders never cease." "She's protective of you," Emma observed. "In her own way. My mother is protective of family interests," Dez corrected, though without bitterness. "Currently, those interests include my recovery and your integration into the organization. 2 goals that happen to align." Emma studied him with those perceptive amber eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "You're still angry about the security breach." "It wasn't a question." Dez closed the laptop with more force than necessary, confirming her assessment. "Someone changed the secure room codes. Someone with inside access. And my father's response has been to demand information rather than address the obvious security implications." "You think the breach came from within your father's inner circle," Emma stated, connecting dots he hadn't explicitly linked. Dez met her gaze directly. "I think very few people could override those security protocols. Murray didn't have the access or expertise. The Doyles didn't have inside information on our weekly code changes." The unspoken conclusion hung between them. Someone close to Jack Murphy, someone trusted, had facilitated the attack on his son. The implications were seismic for the family power structure. Emma set aside her folder, her expression thoughtful. "If that's true, confronting your father directly would be dangerous. He would instinctively protect his people over accepting such a betrayal. Hence my strategic convalescence," Dez agreed grimly. "We need more information before moving against someone in my father's inner circle." The casual "we" wasn't lost on either of them. A partnership declared without fanfare or discussion, simply assumed in the aftermath of crisis. Emma's response was equally matter-of-fact, accepting the alignment as natural. "I've been tracking financial transfers to offshore accounts linked to your father's 3 most senior lieutenants," she said, retrieving her laptop from the nearby desk. "Michael Flynn shows unusual activity coinciding with Murray's infiltration timeline." Dez made room for her to sit beside him against the headboard, their shoulders almost touching as she opened her computer. "Flynn's been with my father for 25 years, since before I was born, which makes him the perfect plant," Emma pointed out. "Beyond suspicion due to longevity and demonstrated loyalty. Or makes him the perfect scapegoat if someone wants to manipulate evidence," Dez countered, ever the analyst considering multiple possibilities. Emma nodded approvingly at his caution. "Hence the need for absolute confirmation before acting. I've created a shadow tracking system for all major Murphy accounts. If Flynn or anyone else attempts to access or modify financial data, we'll know immediately." Dez turned to look at her, genuine admiration evident in his expression. "You've accomplished all this while managing my father, coordinating with Danny, and maintaining the appearance of the dutiful new bride tending to her injured husband." Emma's mouth quirked in that small, private smile he was beginning to recognize. "Multitasking is something of a specialty." "Clearly," Dez hesitated, then added more softly, "Thank you. For all of it." The simple gratitude created a moment of unexpected intimacy between them. Not the manufactured closeness of their public performance, but something authentic, born of shared purpose and mutual respect. "We're partners now," Emma said, her voice matching his in quietness. "Your interests are my interests." "Is that all we are? Partners?" The question surprised them both. Dez hadn't intended to voice it, and Emma clearly hadn't expected it. She closed her laptop slowly, considering her response with characteristic thoroughness. "When I came to Dublin, I expected a business arrangement. A merger of family interests dressed up as a marriage." Her eyes met his directly. "I didn't expect to find someone whose mind works like mine, someone who sees beyond surface appearances to underlying patterns." "Neither did I," Dez admitted. "The rumors about you were deliberately cultivated," Emma finished for him. "By my father, yes, but with my full cooperation. Being underestimated has advantages, as you well know." Dez nodded, understanding perfectly. He'd spent years being dismissed as the bookish Murphy son, the less impressive alternative to Ryan's charismatic leadership. That dismissal had allowed him to build his own base of knowledge and influence without scrutiny or interference. "We've both worn masks," he acknowledged. "Necessary ones. The question is whether those masks are still necessary with each other." Emma's directness was refreshing. No games, no manipulation, just honest assessment. Des considered this, studying her face with new awareness. Without the social performance required for public appearances, Emma's features relaxed into something more authentic. Intelligence and alertness evident in her eyes, determination in the set of her mouth, a quiet confidence in her bearing that had nothing to do with conventional beauty and everything to do with self-possession. "I find I prefer you without the mask," he said finally, the admission offering vulnerability he rarely displayed. Emma's expression softened, revealing a glimpse of the woman behind the composed professional. "As do I. With you." The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Neither moved to bridge the physical distance, yet something had shifted, boundaries redrawn, possibilities acknowledged. A sharp knock at the door broke the spell. Danny Quinn entered without waiting for a response, his expression urgent. "We've got movement." Flynn just accessed the Liverpool shipping accounts from an off-site location. Emma was already reaching for her laptop, the personal moment set aside but not forgotten. Showing what? Large transfer scheduled for tonight. Dockside warehouse. Cash payment for unspecified merchandise. Des straightened, focus returning to the immediate operational concerns. Set up surveillance, but maintain distance. If Flynn is working with the Doyles, this could be our chance to identify his contacts. As Danny left to implement the instructions, Emma turned back to Des, her expression shifting from professional to personal for just a moment. "This conversation isn't finished." "No," Des agreed, the simple affirmation carrying layers of meaning. "It's just beginning." In the midst of crisis, betrayal, and the complex navigation of criminal enterprise, something unexpected had emerged between them. Not the arranged alliance their families had engineered, but something more valuable and more dangerous. Truth, freely offered and recognized. The first foundation of something neither had anticipated when Emma arrived in Dublin just 1 week earlier. The Hibernian Club had served as Dublin's most exclusive social establishment for over 200 years, its Georgian facade overlooking Stephen's Green with aristocratic indifference to changing times. Originally founded for Anglo-Irish gentry, the club had gradually adapted to Ireland's evolving power structures, accepting first wealthy industrialists, then influential politicians, and finally, discreetly, certain businessmen whose precise sources of income remained tactfully unexamined. Jack Murphy had been a member for 15 years, his entrance fee and annual dues representing one of the few legitimate expenses he never questioned. In a city where pubs served as the usual meeting grounds for business of all kinds, the Hibernian offered something more valuable than alcohol or privacy. It offered legitimacy, the appearance of respectability that was worth its considerable weight in gold. Tonight, the club hosted its annual autumn reception, a black tie affair that brought together Dublin's elite across various spheres of influence. For Des and Emma, it represented their first public appearance since the wedding and Des's subsequent accident, the official explanation involving a fall on the cellar stairs, a story no one believed but everyone politely accepted. "Ready for this?" Des asked as their car approached the club's discreet entrance. His recovery had progressed well enough for public appearances, though Emma noted the slight stiffness in his movements that indicated ongoing discomfort. "I've been preparing my entire life for this," Emma replied with a hint of dry humor, smiling pleasantly while surrounded by people who are assessing every detail of my appearance, background, and suitability. Boston or Dublin, some things remain consistent. Des smiled, appreciating her perspective. The difference being that in Boston, you were Tommy Donahue's bookish daughter. Here, you're an unknown quantity, the American bride who may or may not understand her new world. "A misconception we can use to our advantage," Emma noted, adjusting her simple pearl earrings, the same ones she'd worn for their wedding, now establishing themselves as her signature accessory. Her dress for the evening was midnight blue, elegant without being showy, designed to allow her to blend in rather than stand out. Another calculated choice that Des had come to recognize as characteristic of her approach. "Flynn will be there tonight," Des said, shifting to operational matters. "As will Brian Doyle." Emma raised an eyebrow. "The Doyles received an invitation?" "The Hibernian Club values discretion above all else. Men who would shoot each other in the streets maintain perfect civility within these walls." straightened his bow tie with practiced movements. Besides, my father believes in keeping enemies where he can see them, while we keep ours where they can't see us, Emma added, referencing their ongoing shadow surveillance of Flynn's activities. The past week had revealed a pattern of suspicious financial movements orchestrated by Michael Flynn, small but significant transfers that, taken together, suggested preparation for a major operation. What remained unclear was whether Flynn was acting alone, following orders from the Doyles, or, most disturbing of all, implementing Jack Murphy's own undisclosed agenda. "Remember," Des said as the car stopped before the club entrance, "tonight isn't just about Flynn. It's about establishing your position. My father's associates will be watching closely, forming first impressions that will shape how they interact with you moving forward." "And your father himself?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "We'll be evaluating how effectively you play the role he's assigned you, supportive wife, decorative accessory, nothing more." Des's expression hardened slightly. "A role I suspect you'll find restrictive." Emma's smile held a determination. "I've been underestimated my entire life, Des. It's provided cover for everything I've accomplished. Your father's limited vision of my capabilities is just one more advantage we can leverage." The "we" remained unspoken but understood, their partnership deepening with each day of shared purpose and growing trust. As they entered the club's grand reception hall, Emma adopted the persona Des had observed at their first dinner together. Attentive but reserved, pleasant without being memorable. She took his arm with practiced ease, presenting the picture of a supportive wife while her keen eyes catalogued every detail of the room and its occupants. Jack Murphy stood near the central fireplace, holding court with a small group that included 2 city councilors and a high court judge. His expression registered brief surprise at their entrance, quickly masked by paternal pride as he beckoned them over. "Desmond, Emma, I was beginning to think you'd miss the event entirely." Jack's greeting was warm for the benefit of his companions, though Des caught the calculating assessment behind his father's smile, evaluating his son's recovery and, more pointedly, his new daughter-in-law's presentation. "Dr. Whelan gave his approval just yesterday," Emma explained, her voice carrying just the right note of wifely concern. "I wouldn't have allowed Des out otherwise." The subtle assertion of protective authority, "I wouldn't have allowed," registered in Jack's expression, a momentary tightening around the eyes that only those who knew him well would notice. "Emma has been an exceptional nurse," Des added, his hand covering hers on his arm with apparent affection, "though I suspect her patience with my convalescence was wearing thin." The small joke earned appreciative chuckles from the gathered dignitaries, establishing the narrative they'd carefully constructed. Devoted newlyweds managing a minor medical setback with good humor and mutual support. As introductions were made and pleasantries exchanged, Emma maintained her poised, attentive demeanor, offering just enough insight on American politics and Boston society to establish herself as educated but not threatening. Des watched with quiet admiration as she navigated the subtle currents of power and influence, neither overplaying her hand nor retreating into mere decorative silence. "Your bride is quite charming, Desmond," remarked Justice Sullivan, an elderly jurist whose seemingly doddering manner concealed a razor-sharp mind, refreshingly direct for an American, "if you don't mind my saying so." "One of her many qualities that I've come to appreciate," Des replied honestly. As the initial greetings concluded and they moved deeper into the reception, Des felt a familiar presence at his shoulder. Michael Flynn, Jack's most trusted lieutenant for over 2 decades, materialized beside them with the quiet efficiency that had made him so valuable to the Murphy organization. "Desmond." Flynn's greeting was respectful, his weathered face arranged in an expression of appropriate concern. "Good to see you on your feet again. Nasty business, that fall." Des met the older man's gaze steadily. "Quite nasty. Unexpected, too." The double meaning hung between them, a subtle challenge that Flynn acknowledged with the barest narrowing of his eyes before shifting his attention to Emma. "Mrs. Murphy, you're settling in well, I hope?" Emma's smile was flawless. "Very well, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Everyone has been most welcoming." "Good, good. Family is everything in our world." Flynn's emphasis on family carried weight beyond the platitude. "I hope you've had a chance to appreciate some of Dublin's cultural offerings, despite Desmond's accident." "I've been rather focused on Des's recovery," Emma replied, "though I did manage to spend some time reviewing household accounts. Des mentioned you've been instrumental in the family's financial operations for many years." The reference to financial matters was delicate but pointed, a small hook cast into conversational waters to test Flynn's reaction. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Among other responsibilities, Jack has always valued loyalty above specialized skills. Flynn's gaze shifted between them. Speaking of Jack, I believe he was hoping for a private word with Desmond this evening. Family business, you understand. The dismissal was clear. Emma was not included in family business. Before Des could respond, Emma squeezed his arm gently. Of course. I spotted Mrs. Casey across the room. I should pay my respects. She turned to Des with practiced affection. Don't overtax yourself, darling. Dr. Whalen was quite specific about limiting exertion. The endearment, their first used publicly, rolled off her tongue with surprising naturalness. Des found himself responding to it with unexpected warmth. I'll find you shortly, he promised, watching as she moved gracefully through the crowd toward the Murphy housekeeper, who indeed stood near the refreshment table, engaged in conversation with other household staff of prominent families. Flynn led Des toward a quieter alcove where Jack Murphy waited, his expression unreadable. Des braced himself for the conversation ahead, knowing it would test not only his recovery but the careful balance of truth and deception he and Emma had been maintaining. Across the room, Emma engaged Mrs. Casey with genuine warmth while maintaining peripheral awareness of Des's interaction with his father and Flynn. She had positioned herself perfectly, seemingly occupied with appropriate social niceties, while maintaining a sightline to the real action. Your American bride seems to be adapting well, observed a voice at her elbow. Emma turned to find Brian Doyle, head of the rival organization, and the man likely responsible for both Murray's death and Des's attack, regarding her with undisguised curiosity. Mr. Doyle, she acknowledged, neither friendly nor hostile. I didn't realize you were acquainted with my husband's family. Doyle's smile didn't reach his eyes. Dublin's a small city, Mrs. Murphy, especially in certain circles. He gestured vaguely toward Jack and Des. Old rivalries, old alliances, they shift like sand. But we all recognize the value of maintaining certain appearances. The warning, or was it an invitation, hung between them as Emma calculated her response, aware that this public interaction represented both danger and opportunity. The game was becoming increasingly complex, the stakes escalating with each exchange. But as Emma met Doyle's calculating gaze with composed confidence, she felt not fear but a surge of focused energy. This was the arena she had been trained for all her life, despite the rumors that painted her as merely Tommy's bookish daughter. And judging by the flicker of reassessment in Doyle's eyes, she was already rewriting the narrative that Dublin's criminal elite had constructed around her. The plain, forgettable American bride was proving anything but. Rain lashed against the windows of the East Wing, the late October storm transforming Dublin Bay into a churning mass of gray. Inside, a fire crackled in the bedroom hearth, casting shifting shadows across walls that had witnessed generations of Murphy family secrets. Des stood by the window, tumbler of whiskey in hand, watching lightning illuminate the angry sea beyond the estate's boundaries. The Hibernian Club reception had concluded 3 hours earlier. The drive home conducted in tense silence, following Des's private conversation with Jack and Flynn. Now, having changed from formal wear into more comfortable clothing, husband and wife found themselves navigating the aftermath, both the public performance and the undercurrents that had flowed beneath it. Your father is setting you up, Emma said finally, seated at the small table where they had taken to sharing late-night strategy sessions. The Liverpool shipment Flynn has been arranging. Jack knows about it, approves of it. Des turned from the window, his expression troubled. Yes, but he didn't tell you. No. Des took a measured sip of whiskey. He claims it was compartmentalized information. Need-to-know basis only. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. Convenient, especially given that someone with high-level access facilitated the attack on you. My thoughts exactly. Des moved to join her at the table, setting down his glass with deliberate care. Flynn says the Liverpool operation has been in development for months. Major shipment, significant profit potential. And high risk, Emma added. The kind of operation that could attract serious law enforcement attention if mishandled. She leaned forward slightly. What exactly did your father say about your recovery period? Des's mouth tightened. He expressed concern about my ability to handle complex operations so soon after my accident. Suggested that Flynn could continue overseeing the Liverpool situation until I'm fully recovered. Convenient, Emma repeated, the word carrying new weight. And your response? I expressed appropriate gratitude for his concern while insisting I'm quite capable of resuming all duties. Des met her gaze directly. Including oversight of all shipping operations. Emma nodded approvingly. Which forces Flynn to either include you in the Liverpool details or openly defy you, creating a choice between revealing whatever they're planning or exposing the breakdown in the chain of command. Des picked up his whiskey again. Elementary tactics, but effective. Emma rose, moving to the sideboard to pour her own small measure of whiskey, a habit she'd adopted since arriving in Dublin, though she typically nursed a single glass all evening. The question remains, is your father actively working against you, or is he being manipulated by Flynn? Des watched her movements, the precise pour, the controlled grace with which she handled herself even in this private setting. After 2 weeks of marriage and partnership, he found himself increasingly aware of such details, cataloging them not just as operational observations, but as aspects of Emma herself that intrigued him. My father values control above all else, he said thoughtfully. He wouldn't deliberately undermine the organization's stability, but he might test me, push me to prove myself worthy of eventually taking his place. By allowing Flynn to withhold information? By leaving you vulnerable to attack? Emma's skepticism was evident as she returned to the table. The attack wasn't part of the plan, Des acknowledged. That was opportunistic. Someone taking advantage of divided security attention during our wedding. Emma sipped her whiskey, considering the implications. So we have at least 2 problems. The Liverpool operation, which may be legitimate but suspicious in its handling, and a security breach that extends into your father's inner circle. 3 problems, Des corrected. Brian Doyle's interest in you tonight represents a new development. Emma smiled slightly. Not unexpected. In his position, I'd be cultivating alternative channels of information too. His approach was more than information gathering, Des noted, the edge in his voice surprising them both. He was assessing you as a potential asset, or testing your reaction to his interest in your new wife. Emma's perceptiveness, as always, cut straight to underlying motivations, provoking you to determine whether I'm a vulnerability that can be exploited. Des fell silent, struck by the accuracy of her assessment, and equally by his own uncharacteristic response to Doyle's attention. The protective instinct he'd felt watching their interaction across the Hibernian Club's reception hall had transcended strategic concerns about operational security. It had been personal in a way he hadn't anticipated. You handled him perfectly, Des said after a moment. Neither hostile nor encouraging. Professional. I've had practice managing unwanted male attention, Emma replied dryly, though usually with less potentially lethal consequences. The comment, offered casually, opened a window into her experiences that Des hadn't previously considered. The daily reality of a woman navigating male-dominated environments, particularly one who deliberately downplayed her appearance and abilities as tactical choices. Boston must have been challenging in different ways, he observed, inviting rather than demanding elaboration. Emma considered him over the rim of her glass, clearly weighing how much to share. In Boston, I was primarily a curiosity, Tommy's strange daughter who preferred ledgers to society events. Men either dismissed me entirely or viewed me as a challenge to be conquered, proof of their own irresistibility if they could win the interest of the plain, serious Donahue girl. And did they? Win your interest? The question emerged before Des could reconsider its propriety. Emma's smile held a hint of genuine amusement. Occasionally, though never for the reasons they assumed. She set down her glass. Relationships were always tactical for me. Information gathering, alliance building, occasional companionship, nothing that compromised my independence or my father's operations. And now, Des asked quietly, is our relationship purely tactical as well? The question hung between them, more vulnerable than any he had asked before. 2 weeks ago, the answer would have been unequivocally affirmative. Their marriage an arranged business merger, their partnership born of necessity rather than choice. Emma didn't answer immediately. She rose instead, moving to stand before the fire, its light casting her profile in sharp relief against the darkened room. When I came to Dublin, she said finally, I expected a traditional arranged marriage, separate lives bound by family obligation and mutual benefit. I prepared myself to play whatever role was necessary to secure my father's interests, while carving out whatever independence I could maintain. She turned to face him, the firelight behind her obscuring her expression. I didn't expect to find someone who sees me as I am, who values my mind, my skills, my perspective. who treats me as a genuine partner rather than an accessory or an obligation. Des stood, drawn toward her by something beyond strategic calculation or practical necessity. And I didn't expect to find someone who understands this life without romantic illusions or moral pretense, who recognizes the complexity of family loyalty without being blinded by it. They stood facing each other in the firelit room, the storm beyond the windows matching the intensity of the moment between them. "So no," Emma said softly. "This isn't purely tactical anymore. At least, not for me." Des moved closer, close enough to see the amber flecks in her eyes, the subtle tension in her composed features. "Not for me either." The admission cost him something. A lifetime of controlled emotion, of keeping others at careful distance, of strategic rather than genuine connection. Yet it felt like a burden lifted rather than a vulnerability exposed. When he reached for her hand, Emma didn't pull away. Her fingers twined with his, warm and certain, neither tentative nor demanding. The simple contact carried more meaning than any elaborate gesture could have. A choice made freely, a connection offered rather than arranged. "This complicates things," Emma observed, practical even in this moment of unexpected intimacy. "Considerably," Des agreed, his thumb tracing small circles against her palm. "But perhaps it also clarifies them." Outside, thunder rumbled across Dublin Bay. But within the East Wing, something quieter yet equally powerful was taking shape. A transformation neither had anticipated when Emma arrived as a stranger just 2 weeks earlier. Not love, not yet, but possibility, trust. The first tentative foundation of something genuine emerging from an arrangement that had been anything but. Des drew her closer, slow enough to allow withdrawal if desired. Instead, Emma stepped willingly into the space between them, her free hand coming to rest against his chest as his arm encircled her waist with gentle certainty. When their lips met, it wasn't the perfunctory kiss of their wedding ceremony, but something entirely new. Deliberate, exploratory, a communication more honest than words could achieve. No audience to perform for, no tactical advantage to gain, simply two people discovering each other beyond the roles they had been assigned. The storm continued through the night, but neither paid it much attention as they navigated this unexpected territory together. The surprising, transformative power of being truly seen by another person for the first time. The Liverpool operation was scheduled for midnight. A shipment arriving at a nondescript warehouse near the docks, transferred under cover of darkness to waiting trucks, then dispersed through carefully established distribution channels before dawn. Standard procedure for the Murphy organization's more profitable imports, executed with the precision that had kept them ahead of both law enforcement and competitors for decades. What wasn't standard was Des's absence from the operational briefing held in Jack Murphy's study the morning of the shipment. "Flynn says you weren't at the meeting," Danny Quinn reported, standing in the doorway of Des's home office with barely concealed concern. "Jack apparently told everyone you were still recovering, needed rest." Des continued reviewing documents at his desk, his expression betraying nothing of the cold anger beneath. "Did he?" The whole senior team was there, planning details, security protocols, contingencies. Danny shifted uncomfortably. "It's not right, Des. You should have been notified at minimum, and yet I wasn't." Des looked up finally, his gaze sharp. What exactly did Flynn share about the shipment itself? High-value pharmaceuticals, time-sensitive, premium clients already committed. Danny hesitated, but something felt off. The security arrangements are excessive even for prescription medications. Armed teams at 3 checkpoints, communication blackout protocols, secondary escape routes prepared. Des leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "Sounds more appropriate for weapons than medicine." "My thoughts exactly." Danny glanced toward the hallway, lowering his voice. "There's something else. 2 of the security team assigned to the operation are new, brought in by Flynn personally, no background provided." The implications were clear. Either the shipment was significantly more valuable, and likely more illegal, than reported, or something else entirely was planned for tonight's operation. "Where's Emma?" Des asked, already rising from his desk. "With your mother. Some charity committee meeting in town." Des checked his watch. "She should be back within the hour. Until then, I need you to do something without drawing attention. Check every vehicle being used tonight. Not just the transport trucks, security vehicles, scout cars, everything." Danny nodded, understanding immediately. "Looking for what exactly?" Anything that doesn't belong. Tracking devices, unfamiliar equipment, modifications to fuel tanks or cargo areas. Des was already moving toward the door. And Danny? Trust no one with this except Emma when she returns. Alone in his father's house, though it felt less like home with each passing day, Des made his way through the familiar corridors with heightened awareness. The staff moved with their usual efficiency, yet he noted subtle differences in their demeanor, glances averted too quickly, conversations that ceased at his approach. Word had spread about his exclusion from the morning's meeting. In an organization built on hierarchy and respect, such a public circumventing of the heir's authority sent powerful signals. Des found Jack in the conservatory, enjoying a cigar despite the doctor's repeated warnings about his blood pressure. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, casting the space in warm golden light that belied the chilly tension between father and son. Desmond. Jack acknowledged his presence without turning from his contemplation of the carefully tended exotic plants that had been his wife's passion project for decades. Feeling better, I hope? Interesting question, given your concern was significant enough to exclude me from this morning's operational briefing. Des remained standing, deliberately positioning himself where Jack would need to turn to face him. Jack took his time, drawing deeply on his cigar before exhaling a perfect ring of smoke toward the glass ceiling. Flynn suggested you might benefit from another day of rest. Given your recent accident, Flynn suggested. Des let the words hang between them. And you agreed, despite knowing I've been fully operational for over a week. Jack finally turned, assessing his son with the calculating gaze that had intimidated Dublin's criminal elite for a generation. Sometimes leadership means delegation, Desmond. Trusting your people to handle matters in your absence. Trust requires transparency, Des countered, holding his father's gaze steadily, which has been notably absent regarding tonight's Liverpool shipment. Something flickered in Jack's expression, surprise perhaps, that Des knew anything about the operation, or concern about how much he had learned. Standard pharmaceutical import, Jack said dismissively, hardly requires your personal attention. Standard pharmaceuticals don't merit triple-layered security protocols and communication blackouts, Des replied evenly. Nor do they require bringing in outside personnel with no background checks. Jack's expression hardened. You've been investigating my operation. I've been doing my job. Des stepped closer, lowering his voice despite their privacy. The job you supposedly want me to assume fully one day. The job Ryan was being groomed for before his death put me in this position. The mention of Ryan's name struck like a physical blow. Jack's fingers tightened around his cigar, threatening to crush it. You are not your brother, he said, each word precise and cutting. No, Des agreed calmly. I'm not. Ryan would have accepted your explanation without question. He would have trusted Flynn implicitly because you do. He would have put loyalty above logic. And you don't? The warehouse stood silhouetted against the night sky, its weathered brick facade revealing nothing of the drama unfolding within. Rain fell in a steady rhythm, muffling sounds and reducing visibility. Perfect conditions for the operation taking shape under its roof. Des watched from the shadows of an office overlooking the main floor, Emma beside him. Below, Flynn directed the unloading of crates from the recently arrived shipment, his confident manner betraying no awareness that his carefully orchestrated betrayal had been discovered and countered. Your father's team is in position, Emma murmured, checking her phone discreetly. Tommy's people have secured the perimeter. No sign of the Doyle contingent yet. Des nodded, his attention fixed on Flynn's movements. They'll wait until the weapons are fully unloaded. Maximum value before they move in. The past 6 hours had been a masterclass in rapid response and strategic adaptation. Emma's connections had mobilized with impressive efficiency. A team of Boston specialists arriving via private jet, equipped and briefed before Flynn's operation had even begun. Meanwhile, Des had faced the most challenging confrontation of his life, presenting his father with irrefutable evidence of Flynn's betrayal and asserting control over the counter-operation despite Jack's initial resistance. He still doesn't fully accept it, Des had observed as they prepared to leave for the warehouse. 30 years of trust doesn't dissolve easily, even with proof. Emma had understood the complexity of Jack's position better than most could have. It's not just about Flynn. It's about acknowledging that his judgment was flawed, that his most trusted man could deceive him so completely. Now, as they watched Flynn orchestrate what he believed would be the Murphy organization's downfall, Des felt a strange sense of detachment from the anger that should have accompanied such betrayal. Instead, he experienced clarity, a profound understanding of how power structures either evolved or collapsed under pressure. Movement outside, Emma reported, eyes on her phone as updates came in from their surveillance team. 6 vehicles approaching from the North Access Road. Doyle's people, right on schedule. Des checked his watch. 3 minutes until our teams move. Is the secondary route secure? Confirmed. Tommy's people are in position to intercept the weapons if anything goes wrong with the primary plan. Their strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Allow Flynn to believe his plan was proceeding undetected. Let the Doyles commit fully to their assault. Then close the trap with overwhelming force from unexpected directions. The weapons would be secured, the betrayal exposed, and the balance of power in Dublin's criminal landscape decisively shifted. It's time, Des said quietly, checking his own weapon, a precaution he hoped would prove unnecessary. They moved silently down the metal stairs to the warehouse floor, timing their appearance for maximum effect. Flynn noticed them immediately, his confident expression faltering as he registered first Des, then Emma, neither of whom should have known about this location. Desmond, he recovered quickly, gesturing toward the crates. I was just about to call. The shipment arrived early, so I took the initiative. Spare me, Michael. Des's voice carried across the space, causing the workers to pause in their tasks. We both know what's really happening here. Confusion rippled through Flynn's team, loyal Murphy soldiers who had no idea they were being set up as sacrificial pawns. Flynn's hand drifted toward his jacket, but Des's next words stopped him. The Doyles are already surrounded. Your new security personnel have been replaced, and every exit from this building is controlled by people who answer to me, not to you. As if orchestrated, the warehouse doors opened to reveal Danny Quinn flanked by several of Des's most trusted men. Simultaneously, the loading dock doors rolled up, showing Tommy Donahue's Boston specialists in tactical positions. Flynn's face transformed, calculation replacing pretense. Jack would never authorize this level of response without consulting me first. Jack didn't authorize it, Emma said, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Des. We did. The simple declaration hung in the air, its significance apparent to everyone present. Not Jack Murphy's order, not the old hierarchy. Something new. A partnership that had reshaped the command structure without announcement or permission. Flynn looked between them, reassessing the situation and his rapidly diminishing options. So the rumors were true, he said finally. Tommy Donahue's daughter isn't just decorative after all. Neither is Jack Murphy's son, Emma replied evenly. Outside, the sound of controlled chaos erupted as the Doyle contingent encountered the combined Murphy-Donahue forces. Inside, Des maintained steady eye contact with the man who had betrayed decades of trust. You have a choice, Michael. Surrender to us, or to the authorities who are currently receiving anonymous information about tonight's weapons shipment. Either way, your arrangement with the Doyles ends now. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over Dublin Bay, Des and Emma stood on the terrace of the East Wing, watching the first light touch the water. The operation had concluded with clinical efficiency, weapons secured, Flynn in custody, the Doyle forces neutralized without a single Murphy casualty. Your father is waiting in his study, Emma said quietly. Danny says he's been there all night. Des nodded, fatigue and resolution mingling in his expression. This conversation has been 30 years in the making. A son finally stepping out of the shadow of both his father and his dead brother. Emma took his hand, her grip firm and supportive. Not stepping out of shadows, she corrected. Creating your own light. Des looked at her then. This woman who had arrived as a stranger less than a month ago, rumored to be plain and forgettable, yet who had proven to be the most extraordinary person he had ever known. Our light, he amended softly. Everything changes from here. The organization, my father's role, our position. Change was inevitable, Emma observed. We just accelerated it on our terms rather than waiting for crisis to force it upon us. As they turned to face whatever confrontation awaited in Jack's study, Des felt not trepidation but certainty. The Murphy organization would continue, would adapt, would emerge stronger under their joint leadership, not because of bloodlines or tradition, but because they had proven themselves capable of seeing beyond appearances to underlying truths. In the end, that was what had saved them both. The ability to recognize value where others saw only what they expected to see. A woman dismissed as plain had revealed depth of capability that transformed a criminal empire. A man overshadowed by his brother's memory had found the strength to forge his own path. Together they had rewritten the narrative they had been assigned, creating something neither family had anticipated when they arranged a strategic marriage between their houses. A partnership built on genuine respect, mutual recognition, and the rare gift of being truly seen by another person. Not the ending anyone had predicted, but the beginning of something far more powerful than either of them could have created alone.